Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Docker webinar. We will get started in just one moment. Again, thank you for joining today's Docker webinar, Removing the Complexity of Modern App Development. We will get started in just one moment. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Removing the Complexity of Modern App Development with Docker. Before we get started, I want to explain how you can participate. For this webinar, please make sure you have joined via computer browser and audio or through internet audio if using the GoToWebinar mobile app. Make sure your speaker volume is turned up. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them into the questions window of the control panel. We will hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please know this webinar is being recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording via email in a few days. I would now like to introduce our speaker for today, Jenny Fong, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Docker. Jenny, I will now turn things over to you.
Thanks, Melanie, and thanks everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Again, removing the complexity of modern app development with Docker, making the complex beautiful. Again, my name is Jenny Fong, and I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here, and I've been at Docker for the last almost 2.5 years. But today, we're going to take a look at some of the ways that modern app development has gotten more difficult in the last few years, and why many companies feel like they're behind in their digital transformation. We'll also talk about how Docker is making it easier for companies to stay ahead of these technology shifts. But as a warning, this is not a technical webinar. We're going to share some of the latest research from different analyst firms and other software vendors and show you what is happening in the industry and what is compelling a lot of companies to take a look at their modern app development models. So let's get started. So in today's digital era, your customers and partners and even your employees expect to interact with your company in dramatically different ways. From real-time transparency on, say, a shipment or delivery, to mobile banking, to demand-based pricing for tickets to a show. To keep up with the pace of change, it's clear that every company has to become a software company. This is the reality today, where software has become the foundation for achieving your core business objectives and achieving competitive advantages. Software is powering innovation in your business in any industry it's in. Many of Docker's customers today are also in the midst of this transformation. One example is Lindsay Corporation. They're a traditional industrial manufacturing company that makes irrigation solutions and other machinery for agriculture. They're based out of Nebraska, and in the farming industry, Lindsay sees that their future is dependent on being a software, hardware, and firmware design company. So their ability to create differentiated software will enable them to grow and retain customers, support some new business models, and also increase the efficiency so that they can bring new ideas to market faster. So software is now the fuel for innovation, and all companies need to invest in modern applications that take advantage of all the game-changing technology that is available out there. But modern applications are complex. The last decade has seen the rise of many new tech paradigms, changes that have meant more tech stacks, more choices for how and where you run your apps, how you build them. What's common across all of the different modern apps are that they're highly distributed, they're very modular. A single application may now include multiple cloud services, different UI and back-end languages, databases, and even serverless functions. And at the same time, organizations are rapidly moving to hybrid and multi-cloud operating models to gain access to these new cloud-based services. So the challenge for many organizations is that they need to solve many problems at the same time. And that technology decision makers are really being stressed to address all of these changes and take advantage of them to really be on the front end of the digital era. So what I'll do for the next few minutes is explore some of the major trends that are happening and how they affect how you build, share, and run your modern applications. Let's first take a look at microservices. So microservices are a way to architect applications as a set of smaller functional components, in contrast to the old way of doing things, which is one big monolithic code base. Now, microservices is a concept that's been around a long time, but it's really picked up momentum in the last 5 years as organizations start to see the advantages of this architecture and technology to support microservices improves. Think of like the new distributed tracing technologies and monitoring and logging tools. So a lot of developments in the industry have come recently. The high-level concept of microservices, if it's new to you, is that instead of teams of developers working on one large piece of integrated code, you break an application up into smaller components that are each developed by independent teams. Now, some of the advantages of microservices is that an application becomes more modular. So in this particular diagram, there's a team that can revamp and improve the billing experience independent of the rest of the application. This also means that each of these components or each of these microservices can scale independently so that you only scale the parts you need. Now, the importance and popularity of microservices today is undeniable. A recent survey by Lightstep, one of the newer microservices monitoring companies out there, showed that 92% of organizations expect to grow the use of microservices in the coming year, and 86% expect microservices to be the default architecture within 5 years. Now, if you want to sum up why this is such an important trend, there are a few key reasons modern apps are being built with microservices and what they deliver to the business. The first is agility. If you consider each of the different components or microservices being developed by different teams, they can work in parallel. They can improve the shopper experience, or they can improve inventory management without getting complicated in terms of how they work together. And that means that each team can also independently update their particular piece of the application without having to affect and test the entire stack all the time. And so this means that companies can iterate more quickly and rapidly. They can add new features and functions to smaller components, and they can ship this all faster. So it's really about getting new ideas and updates out to market faster. But another aspect of what this delivers to companies is choice. When you break out an application into these different components, each development team has the ability to choose the right technology to build that particular aspect of the application. So consider if, let's say, you want to add some new machine learning capabilities for shopper suggestions, that can be done by choosing the right tech stack for that particular function, and it doesn't need to be the same tech stack that is used by other parts of the application. So the development teams can really choose the best tools to do the job, independent of each other. But microservices is just one architecture change. Another major architecture change out there is in how the apps are designed for resiliency. And it's around this idea that applications will eventually fail. A famous analogy for this type of design is a comparison of pets versus cattle. In the 90s and 2000s, most applications and tech stacks were designed as pets. They were lovingly built, given names, and if an issue occurred or if there's a performance problem, different ops teams would try, in essence, to heal the server or app until it was operational again. With cattle, the point of view is dramatically different. With cattle, each instance is not really named, but given a simple tag. And when one instance is having issues, instead of trying to heal it, you just kill the instance and restart it. And building apps with this model means that the code itself has to be ready for this behavior. So it has to be able to continue to operate as specific instances are brought down and restarted. Now, this concept of resilient design was actually popularized by Netflix in the early part of the streaming business. They created a software program called the Chaos Monkey, which was designed to randomly shut down different servers. The point of that program was to test the resiliency of the code so that the end application would still be able to operate. The quote here, if we could align our engineers to build services that survive a server failure as a matter of course, then when it accidentally happened, it wouldn't be a big deal. And that is the philosophy that they've even grown into a chaos, I think it was a chaos gorilla, which is instead of just shutting down a server, what if you lose an entire region in a cloud? So this concept of building resilient applications, or these cattle-based applications, is also a common thread with modern apps. The key reasons why, again, agility. This time, think of agility as the benefit that operations teams have when they need to quickly respond to issues. They can just go in, restart instances, or they can even roll back to previous releases that were known to be healthy. Compare that to the method of healing a server today, which is trying to debug a failing memory chip or NIC card in a server. That would take a lot more effort than simply restarting an instance. The other benefit of cattle-based applications is the security. So again, if your business is attacked, it's much easier to respond when your application is designed to be resilient. You can patch more easily by leveraging blue-green deployment model. You can roll back, and you can also contain issues much faster and isolate them. So a lot of reasons why modern apps are trending towards the cattle type of application. Now, the next technology shift we'll go over is the adoption of DevOps practices. So this isn't an architecture, but more of a practice and a culture. It's a growth of a CI/CD mindset to continuously deliver updated code and ship it to production. And this is in contrast to a more traditional waterfall release approach. So what I'm showing here is a survey from Puppet and Splunk that looked at the state of DevOps last year. In that survey, they qualified different companies as being on different states of evolution of their DevOps practices. Those in the high evolution group on the right have the most mature DevOps practices. And in the chart here, the group of high performers, you can see that DevOps is a practice used by more than just one team. It's a practice used by one or more departments in a company for the most part. At Docker, we talk to many organizations who are adopting DevOps with containers, but we also see how DevOps can differ from company to company and how they evolve over time. So starting at the top, most organizations start without having a DevOps team. So in that case, developers tend to be the ones who start working with containers. There's a separate operations team that deploy and run them. But in some organizations, there is the start of a DevOps team that takes care of the CI pipeline and containers. They generally support the development team. The next stage of evolution is when companies have, when the DevOps teams also take care of deployment. And sometimes with these expanded responsibilities, they're part of what's called a release team. And then finally, there is a stage where everyone is responsible for both coding and shipping, and there's a mature understanding of how apps are both built and run. And you have an organization that is DevOps centered. Now, there's no one-size-fits-all model for DevOps and the way companies implement it or how they progress along this path. But there are similar outcomes that companies are looking for. Agility, again, is a key theme. Having mature DevOps practices means that your teams can iterate quickly, they can push things to production quickly, which means that in the end, your organization can respond to changes in the market much faster. And DevOps practices also change the way you can think about security, as it empowers developers to think about security from the start. The concept of shifting left with security becomes more practical when you have DevOps in place, and the silos between dev and ops teams are gone. Now, the fourth shift that is happening is one that most companies are well aware of, and that's the adoption and integration of the cloud. In fact, we've crossed a major milestone this year in that over half of all applications will run in some cloud or as a SaaS by the end of the year. This is according to recent Forrester research. At the end, we'll provide a link for access to that report. What we also know is that organizations are not just looking at a single cloud or operating model. The focus today is on supporting multiple clouds, not so much for the ability to save a few pennies here and there, but more to access specific technologies or specific markets. Think especially when you have data sovereignty and governance issues. So why are modern apps cloud first and cloud ready? Agility again. This is the common theme of all these technology changes is agility. The public cloud specifically cuts down on procurement, installation, configuration of servers so that your developers get immediate access to the resources they need. And if projects get killed or abandoned, there's no long-term commitment on the hardware spend. That means organizations can run more tests, try new things, and you can fail fast and try again, all without a huge capital outlay. But the cloud is also great for giving customers more choice. All the major cloud vendors, Azure, AWS, Google, and other leading clouds, they're all introducing new cloud-based services for things like machine learning, AI, IoT, and embracing the cloud gives companies a chance to, again, experiment with and utilize some of these new technologies, which are ways to gain a competitive edge. And then finally, contrary to many of the initial concerns that companies had about putting workloads in the public cloud, many companies see the public cloud being very secure because the major vendors all have to get audited and they get a lot of tests and security pen tests to make sure that their customers are secure. In some ways, they go above and beyond what an average company will do for themselves. And then the last shift that I'll talk about today is open source, the prevalence and adoption of open source technologies in the enterprise. There's a great stat that came out of a recent analyst report around GitHub. There are now over 30 million developers contributing in GitHub. And that is a pattern that we've seen where more companies are sponsoring their employees' contributions to GitHub, to open source projects, and also leveraging open source projects. There's a great quote from this recent report from O'Reilly Media about seeing how there's a shift from just the use of open source to policies that encourage the development of open source. And there's a beautiful thing about open source, which is, again, agility, which comes from being able to adopt new technologies faster. So as new projects come online and gain momentum, companies have access to a broader array of those types of technologies. And that also implies with choice. Another benefit of choice with open source is that because they are open, ecosystem can easily develop around them. So the projects that really take off in the open source community have integration work with all the other major vendor platforms. And again, security, and this is sort of the wisdom of the party versus of one. So the having community contribute to security patches and recognizing security flaws is another advantage of adopting open source technologies. So we just talked about 5 major technology shifts that are happening now all at the same time. Again, each one of these changes can take an organization time to plan for, adopt, and ingrain, because each of them have their own challenges. The emergence of cloud means having to deal with multiple platforms. The emergence of microservices means you have more distributed applications. DevOps is both a process and culture change. Open source introduces new technology every year. And so building modern apps, given all of these changes, is extremely challenging. The good news is that all of these technology shifts are addressed by Docker and Kubernetes. the benefit of Docker containers and Kubernetes orchestration is you get multi-cloud portability. You have the speed of containers and how fast a single microservice can be installed and deployed and run, restarted. You have that flexibility of running any type of app and infrastructure because these are both widely adopted open source technologies. The concept of containers helps with design because we have this concept of immutability. Immutability means that the same application when deployed will always run the same. And then finally, we see that Docker and Kubernetes has been a huge instigator of and a way to invest in DevOps practices because it defines a clear separation of concerns and roles. So Docker and Kubernetes are both a result of and driven by the convergence of these technology changes. And that's only further propelled the importance of these projects. But let me share another stat from our own Docker Hub, and so you can see one of the points of this growing need. This is showing the cumulative number of active Docker Hub users over the last 2 years. Today, there are over 5 million active Hub users, and that number has grown significantly in just the last 12 months. So it's clear that modern apps are being delivered with containers, and containers are the standard for modern applications. But let's think a little bit about how this gets implemented in the enterprise. Because as many of you know, both the Docker engine, which is the Docker runtime, and Kubernetes are based on popular open source projects. But take a moment, think about what you need to do in the enterprise to really adopt this new application delivery model. So first, you'll need security. You're going to need to be able to harden the Kubernetes environment. You're going to want to know what is running in containers and making sure you have encryption throughout. You're going to need governance, which is who has access to what are they allowed to do, and then day one and day two operations, which is not just about your initial deployment, but how do you back up and restore? How do you patch and upgrade? Can this integrate with your existing networking and storage tools? How are you going to do monitoring and alerting? And then finally, developer workflow. A lot of the conversation with Kubernetes today is on the runtime, but you do need to think about how in the first place. And what is the way you're going to build this modern application pipeline for the Kubernetes runtime? So each of these buckets requires deep expertise and a significant effort to implement. When you think about doing it on your own, you do need to weigh, is it worth the time and financial investment to really build this whole stack on your own? Do you have the skills? Do you have the teams to deal with the security and the complexity of that? And also, what are you going to do if there is an outage or downtime? Do you need to have somebody you can call? Now, I will be frank and say many organizations may have some of the abilities to run this in-house on their own, but there are many organizations who also see that they will need a partner to help them deliver this type of modern application model in their organization. So we started this webinar talking about why modern apps can be so complex. At Docker, we're focused on building modern applications as easy as we made it to build containers. Our core design philosophy is anchored on these two principles around simplifying the complex and engineering to enable choice. These maxims give our approach to containers and expand to how we can deal with modern applications. And how we do that is by focusing on standardizing your modern application delivery models, modern application delivery under a single common operating model. So by standardizing all the different types of apps you may build in the modern era with a common workflow that starts with how you build an application, which developers on board so that they are ready to build modern apps. How do you make them productive? How do you then progress from the initial creation of the code to collaboration across dev and ops teams or DevOps teams, and then finally to how you run them. And that is the Docker platform. The Docker Enterprise platform is designed to help you build, share, and run modern applications from hybrid cloud to the edge. It takes a holistic approach to delivery of complex modern applications across the entire life cycle. And it's the industry-leading and only container platform that provides both a desktop experience as well as a cloud experience. So what I'll do now is spend a little bit more time going into those different stages we just talked about. Let's start with how to build modern applications. Building modern applications is easy with Docker Desktop Enterprise. This is a desktop application that you can install on your developer machines. It gives them a built-in certified Kubernetes environment for their desktop so that they can rapidly iterate on their code. They can do local testing, and when they're ready, they can check that into a secure repository. But one of the advantages of our Desktop Enterprise product is that we have a concept of application templates that was introduced recently. Application templates are to provide your developers with a pre-approved, if you want to call it, scaffold for their application. So they don't need to learn how to build the application stack. It's in there as a catalog. They just choose a template and they add their own code to it. So this is really about accelerating developer onboarding, getting them productive from day one, also giving them and kind of aligning to that concept of security where you provide them with the pre-approved templates to begin with. There's also a concept of version packs in Desktop Enterprise that makes sure that whatever the developers are doing locally is also going to be production ready. So it matches their local environment and the Kubernetes version and the APIs to what is running in production. So again, it's all about fast developer onboarding. It's all about speed. And one of the benefits of this tool is Desktop Enterprise works with both Mac and Windows and integrates with all the standard Visual Studio Code or different IDEs that companies use. Now on the share side, so let's say you have a new project. One of the things that most developers will do when they start working with containers and Kubernetes is they'll go to Docker Hub and look for a base image. One of the advantages of being our enterprise customer is that you have access to what's called certified content. Certified content is content provided by third-party ISVs that has been validated with best practices, and we offer joint support plans for our customers using certified content. So for example, let's say you download a Microsoft or Oracle image, you will be able to contact Docker support, and we have a support relationship with those vendors to tackle any issues that may arise. There's also a concept, let's say you've downloaded your certified image, the developers added their own code, and at some point they want to collaborate with their teams on this particular code, or the application needs to work its way through the life cycle of going from dev to test to staging to production. This can all be done in Docker Trusted Registry where we have advanced access controls, again, governing who has access to what. And it also includes secure image signing and scanning. So now not only can you validate what's inside of the container and the application, you can ensure that it came from a trusted person or team. So this is a way of ensuring the secure supply chain is happening, and it again can integrate with your preferred tools, your preferred CI tools, your preferred development tools. And finally, let's talk about run. One thing to note is that Docker is actually supportive of any Kubernetes environment. So if you're an organization that has already started working with Kubernetes in the cloud, say EKS or AKS, that's great. You can run your modern apps on any Kubernetes built with the Docker Desktop and DTR tools. Now, if you are looking to self-manage your Kubernetes environment, if you want to have more ability to customize the configuration of your Kubernetes environment, Docker also offers Docker Kubernetes service, and that includes a built-in dashboard and gives you a way to manage your environment, see what workloads are running and how they're operating, what namespaces they're mapped to. It gives you that visual dashboard, but it also gives you a secure Kubernetes cluster out of the box. So we have built-in secure defaults on in our universal control plane or Docker Kubernetes service, and we've provided things like enhanced access controls and automated lifecycle tools. With the Docker Enterprise platform, and considering the customers that we've worked with, and which I'll share in a minute, what we see across the spectrum is significant savings for our customers, from the initial infrastructure savings that come from increased server consolidation to the productivity benefits from containerization and adopting these new modern application models. So there's definite impact and immediate value for businesses in terms of rolling out the new modern pipeline that is built on Docker and Kubernetes. And we've seen this across the board. Here's just a sample of our 800 plus Docker Enterprise customers, again, covering a full spectrum of industries and segments. Here are just a few of them that we can talk at length about, but let me kind of go into one particular example, which is Liberty Mutual. Liberty Mutual was on stage for us at a previous DockerCon, and they talked a lot about how the Docker platform is helping them execute their digital transformation, because it is an imperative for their business, and it continues to be an imperative for many other businesses as well. And there's this quote from their EVP and CIO about, in a world where we can't predict the future and new competitors come from many directions, we will win by being able to embrace change and reconfigure our priorities in time. With Docker platform, Liberty Mutual's moved 30% of their applications to the cloud while delivering over 6,000 business services. That is impactful digital transformation powered by the Docker platform. So with that, in a few minutes, I'll start taking questions that were provided in the GoToWebinar tool. But if you want to get started and learn more about the Docker platform and Kubernetes, there are a few key assets here that are going to be linked as well. One is the Forrester report that I mentioned. It's called Modernize Core Applications with Cloud. If you want to get hands-on, there is a free trial experience. You go to trial.docker.com. There's also a built-in tutorial for that, so you can explore the components of build and share and run that I talked about. And then finally, if you want to learn more about Liberty Mutual, we have a full case study on what they've done to move 30% of their apps to the cloud. Now, let me go and take a look at some of the questions that have been coming in. Let me see, there were some sound issues, but there's a first question is Kubernetes a must-have for large organizations? I hope you can see from what I shared in the deck that the benefit of Kubernetes is that it indeed addresses many of the different shifts in technology that are happening at the same time. So think about cloud as a great example, because I just talked about Liberty Mutual. So Liberty Mutual's case is, how do we move a legacy company that's been around for 100 years? How do we start moving workloads to the cloud en masse? Containerization and Kubernetes are a great way to make that happen. When you take an existing application and you containerize it, you've immediately made it portable to any cloud that you want to deploy it on. Again, because of the factors of immutability and cloud and running on any infrastructure, all of a sudden we've enabled cloud for the customer. We also see Kubernetes and Docker being used oftentimes to enable DevOps. Again, because it has a cleaner path between developers and operators. It helps to enforce a DevOps model. It becomes a key cog in executing a DevOps delivery model. So oftentimes I say as, is it a must-have? I can't say it's a requirement for every company, but if you want one technology stack, multiple trends and multiple changes in modern app development, Docker and Kubernetes will do that for you. Somebody asked about Docker Desktop Enterprise that I mentioned. There are a couple of key features that I talked about. Those are indeed only available in the Enterprise Desktop. So the application templates and the version packs are available in today in Docker Desktop Enterprise, but those are not in the free download. Do you have good resources and tutorials on creating Docker images from scratch? Yes, there's a lot of great resources. One place I will point you to is if you go to docs.docker.com/get-started. So there's a quick start tutorial in our documentation area, and it will take you from downloading the free Docker desktop to running your first container image and building your first container image. So I highly recommend that. Downloading Docker Desktop especially the free one, is sort of my first go-to step for anybody who's getting started. That is a great way to just get hands-on immediately. Back to Desktop Enterprise, do you have different licenses? And yes, the desktop product is a paid product versus our free download desktop. Sorry, let me say that again. Docker Desktop Enterprise is a paid product compared to our free Docker Desktop product. If you're interested, please reach out to your sales team. They can connect you with a way to trial it and also see if that's right for your company. There's a great question here about, do you have information on deploying applications to Docker containers? So I think this is a mix of, do we have best practices or tutorials around containerization? So taking existing apps and containerizing them. And yes, we do. We definitely have some best practices on that. And you know, one of the things, if you go into the Liberty Mutual case study, one of the things that they talk about is this concept of building a multi-lane highway to the digital era. What they meant by that is they look at their entire application portfolio and recognize that there are some apps that they will redesign completely. So you'll just scrap it and rewrite it. There are some apps that they will want to tack on microservices and start to modernize. And then there are some that they just want to lift and shift into the cloud or into other places. One of the benefits is how Docker is able to help companies do all of the above. So, you know, a common pattern that we support is taking an existing app and starting to add microservices to it so that you can add new modern, maybe it's a new modern UI or new modern integration to API to something else, but it's a way to incrementally modernize those applications. And yes, we have a lot of different resources for that. I can provide over email. There are a couple questions. Yes, the slides will be available after the show. How does Docker Enterprise Platform compare to Openshift? That's a great question. I did want to address. So there is a Forrester New Wave report that came out late last year. Forrester did a very deep study of the container platforms, and you know, I'll let the results speak for themselves. But Docker is a leader in that survey. Up and to the right is always a good thing. And they graded us as having differentiated value, so something that is above and beyond the standard in 8 out of 10 categories. And so we're very proud of that result because it was one of the first times an analyst firm has done a kind of side-by-side teardown of the complete platform. One of the things I'll talk about goes back to what I called our maxims, simplicity and choice. And so on the simplicity side, that's always been something we've taken to heart. How did we make the concept of Linux containers has always been around, or has been around for a long time. What Docker did was make that usable, make it easy to use. And that is something that we take to heart in terms of how to operate a containerized environment. So a lot of the things we do are about getting you up and running easily and quickly. And it's also one of the knocks we hear about Openshift. So and I won't bash our competitors on this call, but I would encourage you to look at the Forrester New Wave report for enterprise container platforms. Question about where you can host Docker Enterprise. That is a great question. You can run that on your own servers in-house, and we see customers who both run it on bare metal as well as in their virtualized environment, or you can deploy it to your own cloud instance or your own virtual private cloud. Either one is totally acceptable. What we often see is companies will mix and match, and there's ability to deploy in your primary data center on your own servers as well as in a remote location in the cloud, and it will operate the same across both environments. Does Docker have plan to support multiple Dockers with host network? I don't think I can address this direct question right now, but what I'll do is I'll refer that one to one of our solutions engineers. I just want to make sure I get you the right answer. There's a question, hi, how is using Jenkins different from Kubernetes in Docker? So we look at ourselves as a complementary tool set to your IDE and CI tools. So Jenkins often is used for CI and builds. What we see is that we're part of that workflow. So if you are building non-containerized applications, you would use Jenkins by itself. Now, but if you needed to build containerized versions of those applications, at some point you need to build the container image, and that's where the Docker tools come in. So we integrate very well with Jenkins. We have some solution architectures, reference architectures around that. So yes, please reach out if you're interested in learning more about how that works. I think we also have some other webinars that have demonstrated that integration. Okay, there's a question about Docker Swarm and Compose, and also Linux and Kubernetes. So although I focus the attention of our webinar today on Kubernetes orchestration, the Docker platform does indeed still support Swarm. What we are still seeing oftentimes is companies who start with Swarm because it has a easier learning curve for beginners. But we also know that and recognize that Kubernetes has a lot of momentum in the industry with ecosystems and vendors, and so we support both. We continue to support Compose and are actually doing some fun things to invest more there. So keep your ears peeled on that. Compose is a powerful tool. A lot of people do like it, again, for its simplicity. So we have more to come there. Question about Windows containers and Linux. Windows containers and Kubernetes. Just so everyone knows, we do have a beta of that available. If you are interested in that beta, please reach out to your sales team. For those who are new to the space, Kubernetes started to support Windows in their 1.14 release. However, Docker has been supporting Windows with Swarm since Windows Server 2016. So we have a lot of experience in helping organizations run Windows containers in production and are excited to expand that capability to Kubernetes. It is in beta today. There's a question, are you working together with Kubernetes to improve better performance together? Definitely. Actually, one particular area, just because we talked about the Windows point, our engineering team has been actively contributing to making Kubernetes work with Windows, and they've submitted a lot of the code to make that production ready. So we definitely have a lot of people working together and are excited to be at KubeCon in a couple of weeks. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, I can
We
keep
have
going.
we have about 10, 15 more minutes questions that you can go through.
Okay. How is Docker Enterprise different from Docker Desktop for a developer? So let me kind of see if I can help clarify that by going back a few slides. Sorry, I know it's painful to watch this. Okay, so we look at it, the Docker Enterprise platform as being all three stages of build, share, and run. Docker Desktop being the tool that powers the build, Docker Trusted Registry as the tool that powers sharing and collaboration, and then Docker Kubernetes service as where you can run. So we see it as an end-to-end situation where you need all the pieces in place, but also recognizing that you can use Docker Desktop and Docker Trusted Registry with your own provider of Kubernetes. There's a question on the business value. How does Docker save on licensing costs? One of the key aspects that is, and I'm going to jump to that slide as well, is when you containerize your environment, you can further consolidate your virtual machines. Because in the virtual machine world, you run one full operating system for every application, and in the containerized world, you can run several applications on one operating system. So in the licensing way of that means that most of our customers see a significant reduction in the number of operating systems that they need to manage and patch and update, and then that also comes across with licensing savings. Could you please clarify the benefits to run Kubernetes in Docker Enterprise and not other cloud providers? Really, to me, this is a more of a discussion of what is your business model in general, right? One of the reasons that we see customers continue to operate Docker Enterprise on-prem is that they're a conservative business that doesn't aggressively use the cloud at all. So in those environments, because they're highly regulated or they have data sovereignty concerns, they need to keep the infrastructure behind their own firewall, in which case they look for a solution that they can manage themselves. Other companies have a very cloud-first mentality and a cloud-first motion, and they will usually adopt something like an EKS or AKS or GKE initially. Again, it's not really something about how the difference in products, but it's generally more of a difference in how the companies run. Now, some of the advantages I can tell you about running Docker Enterprise on-prem is the advanced tooling around the day-to-day operations of it. So here's just a simple screenshot, but what you can do is we track the behavior of your environment over time. You can visually get access to things like if you're running out of capacity, if you have containers that are acting up, and we store that data for you to be able to monitor. You can also tie that into your own, say, Prometheus server, but it gives you a kind of a visual orientation around it. And then again, if you're somebody who runs mostly on-prem, then making sure that Docker Enterprise works well with your SAML integration, Active Directory, or LDAP integration, or your existing enterprise class storage and networking tools. So that would be some of those differences. There were some questions about Swarm versus Kubernetes. I think I already addressed it. Again, we see the uptick of activity around Kubernetes as being beneficial for the entire industry, and so there's a lot of different solutions that are coming out for the storage and networking, and so there's a lot of momentum there. So we definitely see that as the direction people are headed. What I talk about with Swarm is again, if you're just getting started and you just need to run some simple containers, there is an easier learning curve with it. That is something that, again, we've heard from time and time again. It's just it's a simpler tool to get started with. You could, in fact, use the same compose file that you designed for Swarm and use that with Kubernetes. So in a sense, you're not locked into either. Oh, there's a good question here. What would you recommend for a company that's 95% Windows today that want to run containers? Run Windows containers or Linux? That's a really great question. I don't know if I have a single answer for it, but so let me kind of give you both sides of it. It is true that the concept of containers originated with Linux, so there's a little more maturity in Linux-based containers. However, the Windows space has rapidly caught up in the last 3 years since Windows Server 2016. There are a lot of enhancements that were added in Windows Server 2019 to support Windows-based containers. The other aspect that's kind of interesting is also that Windows, or Microsoft, I should say, is investing a lot in making themselves more Linux friendly. So you might have heard of WSL2, which is a way to run Linux on your desktop. There's a lot of great momentum there. There's also, with the .NET Core, they're making it a lot more easier to transfer your .NET code base into Linux based containers as well. So I can't recommend one path or another, but I can tell you that there are a lot of different options out there for you today. There's a question about, do we offer consulting services over the phone or in person to answer questions? Yes, we definitely have a professional services arm that is ready to help you with your container journey. We have our own in-house consultants as well as partner certified consultants that can assist your project. What we tend to do is try to scope your project to help you get to production with containers. Given all the things that are new about containers, we really try to value helping you get to production so you can see the value. But yes, please reach out to your sales rep and they can tell you more about those professional service offerings.
I would say about 5 more minutes, Jenny.
Okay. I'm trying to see some of the newish questions that I haven't addressed. There's a question, what capabilities does Kubernetes have that Docker Swarm does not have? Kubernetes does have better batch processing capability. That's one specific example. And then are there Docker and Kubernetes certification programs? Yes, indeed there are. Kubernetes has its own certification programs through CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. You can find that at cncf.io or kubernetes.io. Docker, we have something called the DAC, which is why did I just blank on the acronym? But we do have associate. That's it. Docker Certified Associate Program, DCA, sorry. And you can find out more about that from success.docker.com. This is a certification validation that you take a test, you get the badge that you can carry throughout. We also, I'll, as a kind of a final set of takeaways. The links that I have here, we will send out in the follow-up email, again, with this recording and the slides. And the other kind of links I will just kind of inform you. I mentioned docs.docker.com is a great resource for learning. It's our documentation page. And then success.docker.com, which is our knowledge base and reference architectures. So both other great places to continue your education. And that's about all the time I have, and I've addressed a lot of questions. If I didn't get to yours, I apologize, but I will send some follow-ups over email as well. Again, thank you for joining us today, and have a happy Halloween.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for all the great questions. We appreciate an interactive audience, so thank you. As Jenny mentioned, this does conclude our webinar. We want to thank our speaker today, Jenny Fong, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Docker. Thank you, Jenny. And a reminder that today's session was recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email to view this recording in the next few days. Finally, if you haven't already, please make sure to register for other upcoming Docker webinars at events.docker.com. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a happy Halloween. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.